Some good news and bad news for the Texans heading into the game in Indianapolis this weekend. Win or go home. But how bad is the bad news? Plus, we'll hear from Bobby Slowick. We'll get into this injury report. We'll get ready for the big game this weekend. Let's go inside the locker room.
Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source.
Welcome to the locker room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 Central, Sports Radio 610, the Odyssey app. See me on Twitch, see me on YouTube, on the Sports Radio 610 YouTube channel, and you can catch me right here in the locker room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. Big thanks to Laremy Tunsil for hopping on the radio show today. Exclusive interview with Laremy Tunsil. He doesn't do too many of those, so I appreciate him hopping on. If you missed that, tomorrow, 11 o'clock, we'll revisit what Laremy Tunsil had to say. Biggest takeaways from the Tunsil interview. And we'll probably go through some of it tomorrow, too, as we continue to look ahead to the game. He believes he should be an all-pro. He believes that he doesn't get as much credit as he should for run blocking. He agreed that Titus Howard should probably stay off Twitter a little bit. We had some fun with that. But if you missed at 11 o'clock tomorrow, you can come right here on YouTube, type in Sports Radio 610, hop along on that. Also available on the Odyssey app. Laremy Tunsil, Pro Bowl offensive tackle, join the show. So let's look at this injury report, and we got the big news that Noah Brown and John Grenard are out Saturday versus Indy. How big is that? We'll get into that in a sec, but first let's get a look at this injury report that the Texans put out, in which they made that clear that those guys were not going to participate. So we have Noah Brown and Jonathan Grenard out. Robert Woods with the hip, he remains questionable. He did not practice. I think Woods probably needs the least amount of reps of any receiver, just because he knows the offense so well. And they've been kind of erring on the side of caution when it comes to resting him. So I don't know how much you put into that. Will Anderson limited. Expect him to go. Andrew Beck, he was limited. Don't know his status. Malik Collins, keep an eye on that one. And then you add Rankins back as well as Tunsil. Tunsil's going. If there was any doubt that Laremy Tunsil was or wasn't going to play, they wouldn't let us interview him today. It's that simple. That would not have happened. They would not have let us interview Laremy Tunsil if there was any question that he was going to play today. So that's 100% a go. Laremy will be on the field. He made it clear. I asked him if he was healthy. He said he's good. But it does seem like he's been a little bit hobbled, but he will be on the field. Let's go through, though, the impact of the guys that we know are out or lack thereof. And the big news, of course, Noah Brown, John Grenard out Saturday versus the Colts. Let's start and answer the question, what is the impact? From the Grenard perspective, it kind of speaks for itself, right? Like perhaps Grenard's best performance was at a time when you needed it most against the Indianapolis Colts, or the Tennessee Titans. You didn't have CJ, you didn't have Will Anderson. You had a lot of guys out, and the defense had a record-setting performance. And all season long, Jonathan Grenard has been one of your most consistent performers. He's a team leader in sacks with 12.5, which is 5.5 more than the next most at Will Anderson. He's your leader in TFLs at 15, which I think is 5 more than Anderson. He's 7th in tackles at 52. So the Grenard thing speaks for itself. Now, as far as being able to overcome it, you're in a decent position because the next man up mentality has worked very, very well on the D-line. Like on the D-line, the next man up thing has been, it's actually been kind of crazy how well some of these plug-and-play guys have looked. So would you rather have Jonathan Grenard out there? Duh. But can you overcome it? Probably so. I also would say that Will Anderson's not going to play 12 snaps this game. Will Anderson is going to play more than 12 snaps. Now, how banged up is he, and what kind of shape are these guys in? If they win heading into next week, that's to be determined. That's not really something you worry about. But Will Anderson's going to, I anticipate him playing more than 12 snaps. I want to get, though, a little bit into this Noah Brown thing. And I know that the wide receiver position is kind of hit or miss. But the case of Noah Brown is really interesting because Noah Brown will have missed 7 games this year with the Texans. 7 games. That's quite a lot to go without Noah Brown. And I know, like, when the games have been the most intense and when you've needed a clutch performance, Noah Brown has come through. There's no denying that. But the lack of consistency is kind of, I don't want to say alarming because I don't think you expected too much from Noah Brown. But when you see that he's out and you realize that it's been so boom or bust, maybe it makes you feel better, worse. I'll let you decide, but I'm just going to throw the data your way because I like Noah Brown. I think Noah Brown is a very, very good guy to have on your squad. If you're in a situation where you're saying we got to have Noah Brown or else we're screwed, you might be screwed to begin with. Let's just be honest. And I'll lay this out and you guys can think for yourselves. I'll just put the data out there. Data, however the hell you want to say it. So Noah Brown has 3 clutch performances that I without these performances, I don't know that the Texans are in the position that they're in. The 3 clutch performances, and we'll go through these. November 5th against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in which he had 6 catches for 153 yards. Half that yardage on what I consider the biggest play of that game, where Cleveland had extended their lead to 14. You didn't have a kicker. It was 14 or 12. You didn't have a kicker. CJ finds Noah Brown. You remember the Tank Dell block, and Noah Brown takes it up the sideline 75, 80 yards, and the Texans score. Without that play, I don't know that the Texans beat Tampa Bay in one of the wilder games of the year. But that is clutch performance number 1. And there's 3 of them. And remember the stats: 6 catches, 153 yards, and a touchdown, a massive touchdown that cannot, should not, and will not be minimized, at least in here. The very next week, you're going to Cincinnati. You don't feel great about the Texans going to Cincinnati, but in that game, Noah Brown had 8 catches for 172 yards. So in a 2-week stretch, he had 14 catches for about 325 yards. 8 catches, 172 yards, including, and I think this one was as big as it gets. The one of the final plays where, if you remember, CJ finds him, and there was a lot of improvising where CJ was finding Noah, but at the end of the game, when you needed the field goal to win the game, Noah Brown picked up an extra 15 yards, whatever it was, and made the Amendola kick much closer than it would have been. So that's 2 clutch performances right there. The 6 for 153 against Tampa Bay, the 8 for 172 against Cincinnati. Now, let's continue on. December 17th, Tennessee Titans. CJ Stroud's out, concussion. The rest of the team is banged up, depleted. This was a huge performance by Noah Brown. And quite frankly, if CJ Stroud had been in, it probably could have been closer to the 150, 170, because there was a couple times where Case missed him. But on December 17th, at Tennessee, Noah Brown had 8 catches, 82 yards, and we all remember the touchdown that tied up the game from Noah Brown. So there you go. 8 more catches for 82 yards. That's 3 really, really clutch performances and 3 very, very high-level, intense games that when we look back on this season, we'll remember, and Noah Brown will be a big part of. Yeah, again, I want to make it clear, like, without those contributions, you're likely not where you are right now. Again, I like Noah Brown. Here's the thing, though. He's played 10 games this season. Noah Brown. Here are his season stats: 567 yards, 33 catches, and 2 touchdowns. So 567, 33, and 2. And we just went through those numbers. Let me just put in perspective how large of a chunk those 3 games are to the 10-game body of work that you've gotten from Noah Brown. 407 out of his 567 yards in 10 games came in those 3 games. 22 of his 33 catches came in those 3 games. And both of his touchdowns came in those 3 games. So I don't know how you want to look at that. I'm not telling you how to look at it. All I'm saying is, I've talked to people at the station. I've talked to listeners, people just around town. And I think they're really, really concerned about Noah Brown. And it can be connected to the Tank Dell injury. But my thing is this. It's been 3 really massive performances. Other than that, it's been borderline MIA. He's missed 6 games, and in 7 games, in the other 7 games outside of these 3, 7 games, 160 yards, 11 catches, no touchdowns. 160 yards, 11 catches, no touchdowns in the other 7 games. Now, I do think there's an element of toughness that I think is contagious with the squad that Noah Brown brings. But when you look at it that way, how much are they really going to miss him? Now, the question will be who can step up. I think Xavier Hutchinson is a sleeping giant right now. Xavier Hutchinson is, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's going to be a future star, but I think in this game, in this situation, with his skill set, with how much experience he's been getting lately, I think Xavier Hutchinson's someone to keep an eye on. I also think the fact that Laremy Tunsil is healthy, and if Andrew Beck's able to go, that could kind of free up the tight ends, specifically Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz has been way better when Laremy Tunsil is in the game. Say what you want about him. We can talk about impact player, all that type of stuff, but Laremy Tunsil opens stuff up for Dalton Schultz. Also, we have the Singletary factor and all that, and hopefully Nico Collins can look close to a number 1 receiver. But when you tell me that Noah Brown, like it's the end all be all for Noah Brown to not be at the game, in the game, I point to the other 7 games and not just the 3 that we focus on the most. Week 1 was a disaster. Remember when they were throwing the sideways pass to Noah Brown? There were people who were wondering, why is Noah on the team? Well, he's on the team because he's tough. He can step up in the right situation. But 7 games missed, and really 7 games with very moderate production. Something to keep an eye on. I don't know what to expect from John Mechie. Quite frankly, I don't expect much from him. They'll give him opportunities, but the John Mechie thing, hey, if it happens, it happens. I'll believe it when I see it. But I've seen a lot to at least have me like some reasonable doubts that John Mechie is going to be someone that's just going to be able to fill a void, Noah Brown or not. We'll see. We'll see what happens with but I would say Xavier Hutchinson would be the one to watch out for, and we'll see if Robert Woods tries to give it a go. I'm going to ask a somewhat crazy question, but I think it's something to think about. And we're definitely getting ahead of ourselves here. The Texans are going to, if they win, they'll be in the playoffs. Now, be sure to subscribe, like, right along. It is the Locker Room, number 1 source for Texans daily digital content. You can hear me 10 to 2 Central, Sports Radio 610, Odyssey app, Twitch, YouTube, all that crap. So the opponents right now, potential opponents for the Texans are Cleveland, Kansas City, Buffalo, and someone says like there's a tie long shot scenario with Miami. I'm not even going to take a look at that. That's just going to give me a headache, and it's just going to throw you off track because it's a waste of time. Or is it? I don't know. Clip that. But it seems like the overall majority want to face Cleveland rather than Kansas City and rather than Buffalo. Buffalo, like if everything goes chalk, which is not often in the NFL, but if everything goes chalk, the Texans win, the Bills win, and the Jags win, the Texans will face Buffalo. If the Jags lose and the Texans win, then the Texans will host Cleveland. Here's my question. Let's put the Chiefs aside here. We don't have to have the Chiefs conversation. I would love to go to Kansas City. I think it'd be a good exposure. I think it would be excellent to go through that experience. I think it would be valuable experience just to go to Kansas City in a playoff game against a vulnerable Kansas City team, no matter what. I think it would be vulnerable. But a lot of you are saying KC too. I feel you on that. But let's just put KC aside. And let's go with like the two scenarios that seem to be getting the most attention. And that's Cleveland and Buffalo. Look, I have a healthy amount of fear for Buffalo. I'm not saying I would pick the Texans in either game. Now I know that Cleveland beat the Texans without CJ Stroud, and that's valid. If you think the Texans would beat Cleveland at home, I get it. But here's my thing with Buffalo. Yes, I think that they're capable of going on a Super Bowl run, but they're pretty banged up, especially on defense. Their top wide receiver is one series away from losing his damn mind. They're not necessarily built to win in the cold. I know the Texans aren't either, but the craziest thing about Buffalo is despite the fact that Buffalo could possess a massive home field advantage because teams aren't used to that type of cold, they're not necessarily built. They're running the ball better with James Cook. Man, I would have loved to have had James Cook. But they're running the ball better with James Cook, but they're not necessarily built there. And the other thing about it is Cleveland's having a bye week this week. Kansas City's resting their guys. Baltimore's resting their guys. Miami and Buffalo are going to go at it, and it's for the division. And there's going to be guys playing banged up, much like with the Texans. There's a chance the Texans are beat to crap next week. Meanwhile, Cleveland, who's been playing some of their best ball right now, they're feeling themselves. Myles Garrett, who was on a sling a few weeks ago, Cleveland's resting up. They're icing up. Now, I get the notion, well, you would still rather face Cleveland at home. CJ Stroud didn't play, but just like we anticipate the Texans to be banged up, Buffalo's going to be banged up too. And their quarterback's banged up. And they're going to have to go to Miami. And I know that they're a favorite against Miami, but Buffalo is going to have to – it's going to be a battle for Buffalo. And, oh, by the way, if you face Buffalo, you have a full 24 hours ahead of them. What if Buffalo gets banged up on Sunday and they decide to put Texans-Bills on Saturday? Texans would have a traditional week's rest. Buffalo would have 5 days, and they would be banged up. Cleveland's got 2 weeks of rest. They're chilling. Just something to think about. Just a small little something to think about. But we'll see how that whole thing goes. Let's hear from Bobby Slowick. We don't hear a ton from the offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans. I know he's been mentioned on lists of potential, coaching, head coach openings. I don't think he's quite there yet. But let's hear what Bobby Slowick had to say during his media availability. He's going to be a big part of things this week. He has a hell of a lot to gain, and he has a hell of a difficult task ahead of him. Here's Bobby Slowick.
Yeah, there's two really good examples that he pulled out right there. That's the biggest thing when you just play that position that we talk about all the time is controlled aggression. Because you got to be willing, like when the look presents itself, when the hole's there, you got to be ready to rip it, which is a mindset. It's also technique. It's also footwork. It's reps that have been built and trust that have been built with the receivers that are running the routes. So that's like the number one thing we talk about, but then it's quickly followed by what if it's not the right time? What if the hole is just too small? What if a receiver just on this particular rep didn't win? Or, what if you thought it was going to be a look and they rolled to something else? And being able to control those situations and still make a profit on the play, still make it a positive play, get a completion somewhere, gain yards, move forward. I mean, that really is what defines an efficient offense. When you're able to stay ahead of the sticks, when you get on 1st and 10, instead of getting stuck in a 2nd and 10, you get to a 2nd and 6. Like, that's a massive difference for how we can approach the next play. And him being able to understand that, like that takes a lot of time. It sounds great when we say it. It sounds great on paper. And he even, he would say early in the year, he believed that also, but putting it into practice and understanding the whens and the whys of doing that, I mean, that takes a talented player and a mentally acute player, but also it takes time and reps. And I think he's shown that growth over the course of the year, in particular, like the last 6 games he's played. I mean, he's really been doing a great job in that area.
Coach, we know how important this game is, coming up this Saturday. When you are putting together a game plan, how much of it is how much is CJ's input brought into that?
How much impact does CJ have on the game plan?
And when you look at it, do you say, okay, CJ, tell me the plays that you're most comfortable with?
That's the question.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common with everybody across the NFL. At the end of the day, I think the quarterback's the hardest position in sports. So making sure that they have command and confidence in what you're doing and how you're trying to do it, and when you're trying to do it is really important. And if a lot of that can be facilitated with a good relationship, with good communication, trust, making sure you're on the same page with each other in that area. And like I said, me and CJ got a rapport pretty quickly. Because of the preparation he does and how fast we could just get through conversations, where I think that the trust factor was built quickly, but it still takes some time. And, me and him being able to go back and forth on thoughts, ideas, things we want to put in the game plan, things he likes, things he wants called, things maybe he's not so hot on that might come up later in the game, not earlier in the game. I think that's always a conversation you have to have with people at that position. I think that's pretty common across the NFL.
They say in the late in the season, you have a defense and a running game as part of your inventory. How much do you feel like
Talking about run game, defense.
that's positioned you guys for this kind of?
Yeah, I think, I said last week, we believe he's playing at an exceptional level, and I don't think that's changed. I think in the run game, the command he has right now of the scheme and of what we're trying to get done has manifested in how we're running the ball. I also think it shows how much better and further our front and our tight ends have come in that area. And just there's holes that are there, and Motor, every time we get the structure we want, the ball's going where we want it to go, and then he's almost always making at least one guy miss. Like we're blocking things for 4, he's getting 7, 8, 9, which that's big time in the run game. And then there's been a couple plays where we might not have had the right structure, or we didn't block it particularly well, and he's made something happen on his own. I think last game, like, we had a 24-yard run, something like that, longest run of the season, and I mean it was not well blocked.
I like that.
He just went out there and made something happen on his own. We had 2 critical blocks on the play that really helped spring him. But he's playing football at a really high level. He's seeing it really well. He's very confident right now, and that's big when you get to this time of year.
Wow. Bobby Slowick meeting with the media types. Talking about the change from week 2 to now, him as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I'd say early on, we've talked about it before. I'd say early on there were definitely some growing moments as far as situations. I'd probably classify myself as a little more on the aggressive side as far as play calling goes, and knowing when to push it and when to back off a little bit. And I think early in the year there were some lessons there, but then truthfully, since the year's gone on, really past week 4, a lot of it now, growth for me has been more understanding our team and our team understanding me. And like, they get a good feel for my intentions when I call a certain play in certain situations, and I get a good feel of kind of what they're really doing well at the moment and maybe not so well in certain moments, and being able to adjust in real time on that stuff, with our guys and how we've grown week to week to week in different areas. That really, to me, is where we've taken off from.
Talking about the wide receiver group and the depth here.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun. It's really been fun all year. Not just receivers. I'll circle back to them, but really with the whole offense. Like, it's been pretty neat going back to week 2 and watching our game against Indy, because both of us are very different teams now. But then just going through the process of seeing, kind of who was out there at the time, and then remembering kind of how we've cycled through some guys since then, guys that are still out there, guys that were out there and are no longer with us, are injured, stuff like that. Really at every position, at every level, we've had some form of people being in and out, and how our guys have been able to handle that and taking advantage of every opportunity they've been given was actually pretty cool to revisit, because it's, so much of what we do is just next week, the next week, the next week. That kind of having a moment of self-reflection right there was pretty neat. Now, specifically receivers, our group, really, all of them have unique skills and talents, and they all kind of fit pieces of a puzzle, and they do things at elite levels very well. And my job and our job as the offensive coaching staff is really to help make sure we highlight those areas. And I think all of the guys in that room have really taken that and ran with it. And they've wanted to showcase what they're really good at, and they've wanted to work on things that they know are a weakness and they need to improve, and they've done that through the course of 18, 17 weeks, whatever it's been now. And we got to continue that this upcoming week, obviously, with the challenge we have ahead of us.
We'll do a couple more. Go ahead, John.
Bobby, there can't be many line coaches that have gone through what Strasser has this year. Could you talk about the kind of job that he's done, and what has he done specifically to help you guys overcome so many injuries?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it. Like, Strauss has been phenomenal. It's been a brand new scheme for him. Very, very different from what he's run in the past when he's coached at the NFL level. So, like, even just through the offseason, like the growing moments he had to go through of trying to figure out exactly what it is we wanted done on how I see outside zone, how I see things playing off of outside zone, inside zone, gap scheme, like all the different runs you can have and different emphasis because of the starting point being so different. Like, there was a lot of communication and just growth there. And then all of a sudden you get in season where you're working through the communication of that to the players, and next thing you know, we're cycling through, I feel like a different front five every week. How he was able to keep that together, and Cole Popovich, our assistant O-line coach, really helped in that area also. Like, just those two guys being able to take command, making sure that we have tight game plans that really highlight things that certain guys, when they're in there, they do well. Maybe staying away from some things that they struggle with, knowing when we have to maybe manipulate some protections, or maybe knowing when we're good. Like, just there's so many little things in there as a game planner that he did that helped me out. I can't say enough. And then just as a coach and as a person, and how he knows his room, and how he's really gotten a feel for the character of his room, the guys in his room, and really cares about them, and how they're doing. I think it has shown in how they've gone out and they've played for him.
Last one.
What is the difficulty of game planning against that Colts front seven?
Difficulty.
There's not much space in the run game, and you don't have a lot of time in the pass game. So that's about as hard as it gets when you're talking about offensive football. A lot of times for us, a lot of what we do starts with the run game to set up play pass. That's not as easy this week for certain. And then when you go drop back pass, the front four, they make sure you play on time and on rhythm, and that's something that we got to be on top of, starting at the quarterback position, but really all the way across the board. We got to make sure when the time is right. Like I said, we have controlled aggression and we're putting the ball up, but by and large, we just got to do everything we can to make a profit on every play.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Coach.
Thanks,
There
everybody.
you go. It's Bobby Slowick talking about the balance and everything that's going to go into that. It'll be interesting to see how Slowick handles this. Something else that I kind of want to keep an eye on is the early chess match between D'Amico Ryans and Shane Steichen. And I think this one's interesting because different personnel, different situations, but these two guys have faced off. Shane Steichen's offense versus D'Amico's defense. They faced off 3 times, including in the NFC Championship game last year. And in week 1, the Colts started out with a 10-play, 75-yard touchdown drive that took, I think, 5 minutes. No, 4:16 to score on. In the NFC Championship game last season, when these teams met, there was the Eagles started it off with an 11-play, 66-yard, 5-12 drive that led to a TD. So I think that's important. Now, the year before that, in 2021, the Eagles had a field goal on their second drive, but they didn't score on the opening drive. But I think when we're talking about like a chess match between these two guys, and I think Shane Steichen, there's a chance Shane Steichen ends up being one of the most respected game plan type of dudes in the league. I think D'Amico kind of got dissected early on by Shane Steichen. Whatever Shane Steichen saw in D'Amico's defense, and it could be a personnel thing, but he was able to dissect him early. Now, as the adjustments were made in that NFC Championship game, San Francisco had no chance because they lost their quarterbacks. But even when Minshew came in, I do wonder, with D'Amico preparing for Richardson all week, would he have figured it out? Don't know. But he was preparing for him all week, and Steichen's offense came out there and dissected him, just like he was for Hurts and the Eagles. So I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on, the early Steichen versus D'Amico matchup, because the tendencies are kind of they have to be at least known to a certain point. Despite the personnel differences. And I will say this for D'Amico, like it's probably a hell of a lot. Like I hate to disrespect Gardner Minshew. I know he's proven a lot of people wrong in his career, but I would tend to think it's probably a little bit easier to prepare for Gardner Minshew than Jalen Hurts or Anthony Richardson. Even if you think Minshew is the better quarterback, I would tend to think that there's a little bit more that goes into preparing for that than preparing for Gardner Minshew. Couple of comments here. X-Rat, appreciate everyone for coming through, says, let's win Saturday first. I guess he's talking about scenarios. I mean, why even talk about the game? Let's just go to sleep and then get to Saturday. Like, I don't understand that. Like, I'm not a player. I'm not a coach. I'm not going to sit here and say, I got to focus on the game. I'm excited for the game. But let's win Saturday first, obviously. Like, none of the playoff scenarios matter if that doesn't happen. So, okay, like, what's that going to do? Like, if they lose, are you going to say it's because I looked ahead to some playoff matchups? What kind of stuff is that? El Campa Guache, if the Texans face the Browns, the Texans are out. The NFL wants to see Flacco versus the Ravens. I don't think the NFL cares. And I don't think they would mind seeing CJ Stroud take on Lamar Jackson. I don't think, like, whenever people say the NFL wants this, the NFL wants that, there never seems to be like a real method to the madness. Seemed like the Chiefs were getting a lot of calls for a while. I think the officiating just sucks. I don't think there's like some sort of the NFL wants. Titans are going to save Vrabel's job. That's what Rick says. I don't think Vrabel's job is on the line. X also says Buffalo is a juggernaut right now. They could be banged up, though. Frank says, bring anybody on. Hey, beggars can't be choosers. You get into the playoffs, whatever happens, happens. Grit says Hutch is great, but stop the jet sweep. He ain't Tank, and I hated it with him. Yeah, the Tank pitches and all that was a little bit exhausting. The Hutchinson jet sweep kind of Bobby Slowick loves reverses. Like he just loves reverses. Calvin says just throw to the open man. Assume he's talking about the Noah Brown thing. Here's the thing. Guys aren't always open. That's the problem with these receivers. Specifically, you go back to the Jets game. They weren't open. I think Joe has a good perspective. I think it's amazing. We're debating playoff seeding. This time last year, we were debating draft position. What a turnaround in year one. Amen. It's really nice to get to talk about playoffs instead of hoping that they lose. That is for dang sure. So how much of a loss is Noah Brown? How big of a loss is Jonathan Grenard? Who is your ideal playoff opponent? And I want to end this with one final thing. If the Texans get to the playoffs, then the discussion can be had about pressure on CJ Stroud. But I'm very amused by the talk about CJ Stroud and, big games and the big stage and all that. I don't think, and CJ has talked about this before, we can fully grasp how much more pressure CJ Stroud went through at Ohio State than he's going through leading into this game against the Indianapolis Colts in week 18 of an NFL season in Gardner Minshew. Dude can't even walk around campus. There's the difference between CJ Stroud here and CJ Stroud at Ohio State. And I was talking about this with B. Scott today is CJ Stroud in like 6 games this year during his media availability. And you've all ridden along and watched it. And you've kind of seen me roll my eyes on it. He's been asked about, well, what was the moment where you knew this team might compete? When did you know this team would be better? 5-3, bro. Or 9-7. We haven't done anything. At Ohio State, you can win by 20, and you're getting questions like, what the hell's wrong with this team? What's going on? What are we doing here? He's going in front of some crazy-ass crowds. I respect what the Colts do. It ain't the same as going in the big house or going to Happy Valley or anything like that. Maybe when the playoffs come around, that matters, but there is no pressure. CJ Stroud's not feeling pressure right now. Now, I had a listener today, shout out to him, get semantic and say you can't measure pressure. Sure, you can't measure pressure. You could say that about anything. Like you could be the wise ass and say you can't measure anything. But what does DeMeco Ryans always talk about? He talks about rat poison. He talks about outside noise. I can assure you the outside noise at Ohio State leading into some of these games and all the pressure and the bigger media and stuff is much more noise, and there's much more potential to get distracted than there is here. So if CJ Stroud fails, CJ Stroud is going to fail because maybe the personnel around him wasn't there. Maybe it's just some sort of growing pain, or maybe they were just a better squad. We don't need to over romanticize it and act like CJ Stroud is going to, if they lose this game, it's because of pressure. This is nothing to CJ Stroud. He'll be ready to go, and I'm ready to go as well. Tomorrow, we got Football Friday, the exclusive Laremy Tunsil interview with your boy and John Lopez. You can hear that at 11. The rundown is stacked. We've got a lot to get into. We've got a lot to talk about, and we'll be right back here on the stream. We'll react to the final report. We'll give you the latest news. Might even do a stream the morning of the game. Don't typically do those on Sundays, but primetime might call for that. Be sure to subscribe, like, ride along, YouTube, Twitch, tomorrow morning on the Sports Radio 610. And always remember, when it comes to this Texans stuff and even the win or go home game, what a difference a year makes. We're all in it together. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Appreciate the love. Much appreciation. Good times. Good weekend ahead.
Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize, every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not 2. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube.